So on the keep side, well, what's the average? I don't know if there's enough data, but do you have a number on what the average tenure is for Gen Z in a given role or at a
Yeah,
given
it's hard
company?
because the generation's been in for like 2 years. They're looking at a year, maybe a little bit more. I will say the one thing that we found in the research that's a little bit different than what you're hearing, and maybe this will play out over time, is because of all the uncertainty they've seen in the world, right? They've seen all this uncertainty, whether it's economic, climate, racial, whatever it was. They do strive for safety and security. So there is a component here that if you get all these things right, now I'm not saying, listen, we're not going to get all of them 100% right, but as long as you're making motions to building organizations that are these ways, there's a good chance this generation is going to be loyal to you because of that desire to be safe and secure. But at least right now, I mean, the data is so I wouldn't even claim to say, but I've read things 12 months, maybe a little bit less.
Okay, but it's still emerging data. That's true. And to your point about security, one of the things that I've read, and again, would love to know if this is supported by your data, is millennials all wanted to be an entrepreneur. Everybody wanted to be Zuckerberg, right? And be the next Google, the next Facebook, the next whatever. And that kind of flies in the face because that's the opposite of safe and secure. Highly entrepreneurial, take a risk, bet on me, that kind of a mentality. And to your point, because of the financial crisis of 2008 and kind of the years around it, watching your parents lose their job, potentially losing your home because of the mortgage crisis, it's like, I don't want to go through that crap. That looks horrible. That took a terrible toll on my parents, my family. I ain't looking for that. And secure feels okay to me not as long, but your values need to align. But security is pretty high on that list.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it manifested in that entrepreneurial spirit. I think what I saw, and obviously we didn't do research on millennials, but if I were to sort of correlate these two things, I think it's this erosion of contract that I talk about, which started with short-term earnings, saying, okay, anytime there was, and we saw it play out the first half of this year, right? So a bunch of companies that had hired so many people fired people. Now, there is an argument that they overhired and still is a net positive. And I agree with that. There's a lot of data that shows that. But this erosion of this, like if I give you everything, you're going to give me something is gone because now it's like, oh, the minute we have short-term issues, we're going to fire people, right? It's the only true lever and true control a company has is the ability to hire and fire folks. And so I think that erosion has led to a lot of the millennial conversations around I'm going to control my destiny, or I'm going to take a second job or do gigs or things of that nature. Right. In this generation, it's you're going to see that manifest, but it's only if that contract continues to erode, right? That's the key factor here. Generally, they want safety and security, but it doesn't. Where in 96, I was looking for a job. I was looking for safety and security. And so I was going into places where maybe I wasn't too excited about the company itself or what they didn't really understood what they stand for. No one was really talking about like their purpose around climate control at that time. Now it's like that those are non-negotiable for folks. So you might see some of this shifting, and it may feel like they're job jumping, but they're looking for an organization where some of these cultural norms and things that they're used to are in play, or at least improving within that organization. So it's a very different strategy than we saw with millennials.
So I would like to talk a little bit about mission matters, because, if you're, I don't know, manufacturing a better for you food product, or you're doing some carbon reduction thing, something that's like pretty easy to see why we do what we do. Versus, we make bolts and screws and we make I-beams and things that just aren't maybe directly in line with that. Does every company at least have a chance to have a mission that's attractive to a Gen Z?
Yeah, listen, I think it's, like you said, I think it's a lot more linear in certain companies than it is in others. And And by the way, the same effect opposite wise, right? So, there might be a recruiting challenge with oil companies because maybe Gen Z doesn't see them as having a strong mission. So I think, it's one of those things that it's the more you get away from sort of the center of the mission, the harder it is to correlate, but it's not impossible, right? So when I think of, nuts that go into beams that could go into schools that are, in underrepresented areas, right? So even though I am just manufacturing this one piece, this piece is part of something more grand, or maybe, it goes on to the shuttle and the exploration of space is, there are different ways. You want to do it authentically. You don't want to BS it. So, you might not have direct connection to it. Like even at Suzy, our mission is to enable human understanding, right? So we're a market research platform. So the core of what we do is we sell licenses to large companies so they can question and get consumer insights from actual consumers. And that impacts their how they sell their products, what products they build, everything else. But our mission is to enable human understanding, because those companies need to understand what humans are thinking, not only in products, but generally about their lives. They also need to be diverse voices. They can't have just one sort of segmentation or ethnicity. So it really drives a lot of what we do. For us, it was in direct mission, right? It wasn't a direct one, but it was kind of secondary, and we figured out how to manage that. So I think not having one, I think could hurt. But having one will not hurt. I think having one, but as long as it's authentic and it's not made up, like it's, I think of Philip Morris, for example.
Sure.
I don't know how they would, how you manage that. I mean, maybe, I couldn't even try that.
That would be a tough one
that would be a tough one, but there are likely people that will work for them and be fine with it. So there is going to be a segmentation. Of the generation.
So one of the other, core qualities that you talk about is autonomy. And you would not be the first guest in the past 6 months where autonomy has been really kind of a core tenet of what drives human happiness, is feeling like I've got some control over what's happening in my life. In the context of Gen Z and in your research, can you build out this notion of autonomy a little bit?
I can, and there's going to be different degrees of autonomy based on skill sets. So it's not just, I think oftentimes what my fellow speakers and I don't really clarify is that there's going to be degrees of autonomy, and it's not really talked about all that. There can't be just blanket, like, you've never been in the workforce, you've never done this stuff, I'm just going to let you go and do whatever. Like, there's going to be guidance, and generations, anybody really, any employee wants that guidance when they don't know, but they also want the materials and the learnings to happen too. So how do we support that? But autonomy is really, really interesting when it comes to Gen Z, because you think about, again, a group of folks that have been digitally savvy. So never having really any blockers to information whatsoever, other than maybe mom and dad taking away their iPhones, but literally unprecedented access to anything. Now, if I add ChatGPT, it's like, oh my goodness. And by the way, you have to say ChatGPT at least once a day, or the AI gods do not get their giving. So there it is. ChatGPT, I said it twice. So unlimited access in a chat format. Wow. Like, this is going to be unprecedented. This is why we've seen the fastest user expansion in any technology we've ever seen in ChatGPT, but it's access to this information. So when you have access to unlimited information, you think you're going to know everything or can get access and research. That's one thing with this generation that we don't highlight enough, is their ability to research and get to information, right? So if they don't know something, they're eager to learn it. They're going to find it. Again, for us, it's so funny, little adjacent, I apologize, but I was at a dinner this weekend, and I'm obviously a homeowner, or not obviously, but I'm a homeowner. I have kids, but I'm not technically savvy in any of those things. I don't know how to put together anything. It's terrible. Like, my father did not hand down any handiness whatsoever. So these guys were all talking about how they're pretty handy to begin with, but they're using YouTube to learn about, like, one was putting in a window. I can't imagine, like, even if I watched YouTube, there's no chance I'm putting in a window. One did repaired his dryer, all these sort of things. Like, it's just amazing to me. Like, this is Generation X and using these technologies, right? So again, this idea of autonomy is, let me figure this out. I've been a gamer. Again, one of the things we didn't talk about before was this generation majority gender identity regarded are gamers. Most of them are gamers, right? So they're building worlds. They're building these worlds on Fortnite and other things, right? Yeah. So this ability to do things, construct things, the ability to research, I think it gives them a lot of, like, hey, I can figure this out. And that's why they're really looking for that level of autonomy. Like, that is a big deal. And it also manifests in some mistakes we've seen by companies recently, especially when the pandemic came, when they started measuring certain keystrokes, or if your camera was on, that you were productive. If you're a software engineer, you're never on your camera. Does that mean you're not productive? Like, these measures, we call them Cobra effects in the book. We have to make sure we're not, the generation, and I think this should apply, and which is why you're seeing a lot more often in your conversations outside of Gen Z, is it should apply to everyone in an organization, is let's measure the output. What is the quality of the output and the measure and productivity of the output versus how they do it, right? Who cares? I've always said, I don't care if you moonwalk on the roof. If you get your stuff done, your bestseller is over quota by 150% and is generally a good person. Really, like, I would love to learn how they're doing it, just so we can impart that wisdom on other folks. But autonomy is actually a very, very big deal. And I think it's across generations. It's not just.
Yeah, we're going to be doing another episode here very soon on results only work environments. And that's really the thesis, and it's then within that, there are two sides of the same coin. One is autonomy, but the other one is accountability. Yep. Get your stuff done on time with excellence, right? And if you're doing that and you're doing other stuff, I really don't care if you're doing it 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. I don't need to see you in the office, right? You just need to get your stuff done. And as you say, be, generally a good human being and not disruptive to the culture of the company.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, well, that's kind of what we pay you to do, is to do your thing. Very quickly, because, man, we could go for a while on this.
Sure.
Can you talk about, I've learned to not like the expression work-life balance as much as work-life integration. And, then kind of the double clicks on that around, just health and well-being in general, and mental health and well-being in particular. So can you kind of unpack a little bit about, just the whole work-life integration and how important that is or isn't to Gen Z?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think when you say balance, it's two forces that are
competing. It's two opposing forces. You're just trying to minimize the disruptiveness of it versus being in a flow state.
Exactly. And it really, like, there's so much science around this. And that's the other thing. Like, it's so interesting, and it's oftentimes I even check myself, even though I wrote this book, right? So we had someone within one of our Slack channels talk about the 4-day work week, and a lot of stuff that's happening there. Now, I haven't seen the data to support it in the US. Some folks in the UK seem to work out, but we'll leave macroeconomic things alone around that. But I don't think they've seen GDP growth for a while. But we haven't seen the data yet in the United States, but they called it out. They're like, hey, if we're a data first company, the data is showing that this works. And I was like, I had to make sure that my research, like, I was ready to respond. And I'm like, hold on, let me do the research, make sure my position is right here. And it was like, there's not enough data yet. Right. So that was so it's this idea of work-life balance. It's just, again, more of the cultural norms of kind of like, there's this thing on TikTok that's happening where people go up to other people and say, what's your salary, right? This transparency that this generation's so open to. I can't imagine. I still don't, like, my parents don't even know what I make. Like, I'm not telling anyone what I make. but this generation is very open with this kind of thing. So again, the health was always a thing we know. It's not anything new for generations, but the openness to the impact of health on our well-being in general, like, and also our work well-being. The science is out there now. There's enough data to support, and they're more open to talk about it. Mental health, again, same thing. It was a stigma. Like, it wasn't mental health, it was mental issues, right? So it was always more of a negative connotation during the customs when
mental illness.
Mental illness, right? Oh, illness, that means something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Where now it's like, no, it's about mental health. Yes, there's some issues, but it's all about getting better and thinking about the brain as a muscle. It becomes more common again they're more open to talk about it. So the customs and their experiences, those expectations are brought into the workforce. And so they're okay discussing these things. And that's the interesting part, because when those things happen, we're all like, ooh, you want to talk about that in public? And again, that if we learn more about this generation, we'd be like, oh yeah, that's kind of how I wouldn't do it. But that's not, I'm not right or wrong. It's just sort of how I grew up, and I wouldn't do it. Maybe it is healthier to talk about it, but they do, right? So it's this need of this integration of health and wellness and work, and how those things are intertwined. And there was, this is outside the book, but there was a group that we worked with at Suzy called the Energy Project, and they did science studies around energy. And they looked at athletes, they looked at workers, and what they found was that you can work straight for like 90 minutes, and then you need some sort of break. It could be a minute, it could be a 5 minute, it's a walk. It's just to sort of re-energize you for the next thing. And it's aside from any Red Bulls and other things, it's this concept of this rhythm of 90 minutes rest, 90 minutes rest. So of course it has to be integrated, right? We're not working 8 hours straight without a break. Right. And so it's got to be integrated in some way. And the more that we get data, the more research that's out there, the more this generation has access to that research and data, the more they're going to come to their organizations and say, why aren't we doing? And the other cultural and custom that they're not afraid to ask. It doesn't matter where they are in the hierarchy of an organization. They're going to call you out and say, why aren't we doing this? And it's going to be a challenge for some companies that are very used to not having that kind of integration in their workforce.
Yeah. So given some things that you've talked about in terms of, kind of the always on to information, gamification, social media, 8 seconds, how work gets done changing or going to change to accommodate how they process information and actually get stuff done?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it evolve already from email to Slack, and these more sort of two-way communication tools, this ability to sort of trade things quickly. We're already seeing some of that, and it's so funny because that world is strange. It's not strange to me, but I find myself easier managing emails. I have an email, I have a task, I go do it, I go to the next one, right? Very task oriented. Where Slack is more like bing, 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 bing. You're constantly back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? And it's like this noise to the left of me. But we're already seeing that. We're seeing that ability to sort of work on things in a very quick way, almost like handing things off, handing back. Technology is only going to get better and better with those kind of solutions. So I think that manifests in our workforce. I think that allows, and that also presents challenges in terms of the expectations, right? So if I send you something, do I expect an immediate response? Or if you're working on other things. Yeah. And so I think it's going to change the way we think about things, as opposed to like, hey, I need an answer. It's setting the expectation. I need an answer by X, or I need, it's putting a little bit more, in the chat GPT world, there's this thing called prompt engineering. You have to put all these specifications in to get the right output. I think it's a great analogy. I just made that up. But I think it's the same thing. I think we're going to have to prompt engineer folks to say, okay, I need this output, I need this quality, I need it by this time. And then that person, the individual, is going to identify and say, when do I need to get that? Like if I need to get that to you tomorrow, I might do that tonight. And one of the greatest inventions ever created in email was send later. in Gmail. Greatest thing. And Slack, same thing.
Yep.
Oftentimes I find myself the most coherent at 9 o'clock at night, and I'm answering emails, but I don't want to necessarily send that email to you because you're not working. And so it's this other world where people are going to work based on when their energy happens. And so it's going to be interesting to see how, I think that the thing I'm really interested in mostly is how you support clients with that kind of work, right? Are clients going to be like that? Or is this just set norm 9 to 5? We're all going to work outside of that, but because of all these technologies, we'll get pings during that time frame. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this all
I think one of the anchors in that will be work-life integration and, a little bit of boundaries. And leave me alone. I don't really want to. I'm doing something else right now that's more important to me. So I'll be back to you when I'm back to you. This is a weird question, and you kind of telegraphed this already, so I'm probably going to ask it poorly. But kind of like the watch outs or the caveats. So I'm a big company, and I'm acknowledging everything that you're talking about. This new generation with some variables is getting introduced in our organization. How do we, or is there anything, guardrails probably isn't the right word, but things that we can be doing, should be doing to help folks assimilate as well as possible while still getting everything done?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's the assimilation on both sides, right? Getting used to the generation and the generation trying to get used to some of the cultural norms. I think,
is that mutuality felt?
No, I think there's challenges on both sides. Like I would almost write a book for both sides. My book is more focused on the companies.
Yeah,
I'm sure someone's working on the Gen Z side. I think the challenge with that is that they may perceive it as acclimation, right, or assimilation, which is something that we were just talking about. Maybe that's not the right answer anyway, but I think it's setting cultural norms. Like when we onboard new employees, whatever generation they're in, we sort of set like, this is how we operate communications wise. This is, if 6:30 or 7:30, you shouldn't expect an answer. Like setting, I think being transparent about these things, but also I would, being honest about them, and also, being what's the word I'm looking for? Just making sure that you're authentic. That's another key. Like I think oftentimes we talk about this generation looking for diversity, right? They're looking for organizations that are diverse. So in all your communications, you're saying you're a diverse company. They go on LinkedIn and they see that your executive team are all white males, or your board is all white males, and there's really no diversity in your organization. That is a call out. That is why I worry for the organizations themselves. But for the employees, for the Gen Z, I think it's more of making sure that, this is, whether they like it or not, they want also that authenticity. Like, hey, this is our organization. This is how we expect to operate, and we expect you to manage within that. But also know that you're open to feedback. Like, hey, I know this is how we operate, but if there's some other way, maybe we can talk about it. I think always being able to listen is going to be a key factor too.
Well, I think to your earlier point, who doesn't want that?
Yeah, exactly.
Can we be more inauthentic? I prefer that.
I'm going to give you a list and tell me, like, do you want global climate devastation? Do you want racial inequity? Like, which one is the want, and I think the challenge is a lot of companies are like, I don't know how my company can impact that. And my answer is, yes, you do. There's a way, even if it's a couple of degrees off, there's ways that you can support and share that. So
is there anything in your research, we're talking about diversity, and this is a topic that comes up pretty frequently on our podcast. And I'll give credit to Johnny Taylor from SHRM for helping frame some of this out for me anyway, which is, be careful what you ask for, because when you get diversity, you're going to get diversity. And you're going to get people who don't see things the same way that you do, right? And I'm going to make a little bit of an assumption that may not be true. But back to the environment that Gen Z has grown up in, the tone in discourse has gotten very shrill. and it's no more about debating, it's about defeating, and you just have to be louder and shriller. And so then when you're in a diverse workforce and not everybody sees the world the way that you do, is screaming about it like okay, and just flaming the employer on every social media platform you can find. Like, how do you see, is that even a fair predicate? Is that even true, what I just said?
Well, a certain degree. I mean, I think it's kind of the non-negotiable stuff that we're seeing. And again, I would argue that whatever they're screaming about, let's look at the context of it and see what they're screaming about. I think for the most part, it's, they're fighting against systems that have been in place for quite a while, right? So like I would look at what's happening there and why. But I think if you build a listening platform where you are authentically listening to your employees, then there's no channel for them. There's no need for them to do that. But I mean, you're not only listening, but you're also taking action, even if it's incremental. But that might be the new norm. Again, that, prior generations would accept some of these things as like, okay, it is what it is. This is what I'm going to deal with. This generation, there's a lot of non-negotiables for them, and they're going to let you know it. And so it might be a new normal that we'll have to work through. But I think if you give folks channels to provide feedback, to provide their opinions, where I don't think a lot of companies are set up that way, I think that's an opportunity there. I think it's an absolute opportunity, because if there's a vacuum of that, the only channel they're going to use are the ones that are the loudest or the ones that they initially find, right? Yeah. So, and often that's your all channel or your social media channel. And some of it is, I think I've seen some of this call out, while aggressive, it's not my style. I'd be more thoughtful about it. But, there's a company saying one thing and they're actually doing something else. I can't fault them for calling them out and holding them accountable.
Be mindful of the time. Speaking to, C-suite level people who might be listening to this, what are the top, you fill in the number, 3 to 5 takeaways that you would want somebody to get from your book and begin applying at their company as soon as possible?
Yeah, I mean, not in the book, but by buying the book is first to learn about, do the research, understand the generation. I would say the digital savviness is a critical component, and the ability to access information very quickly. That's something that transcends find, keep, and elevate as you think about your tools, your recruiting, whatever it is. And then I think just I would say be authentic. So when you are perpetuating certain things, and this could apply to anything that this generation is looking for, actually do it. Like, don't just say that you're diverse. Make sure that you're building a diverse organization. That, and we've seen it perpetuate with some of the social media postings. I forgot what they call it, but whenever they post for for a certain month and then that post goes away, it's kind of just it's fake support. So be authentic about all these things. And then the book has all the details in terms of what those things need to be.
Well, I think we'll say this now for the third time and end on it. Who doesn't want these things? Like, these are good things. Like, we like diversity. We like, a healthy, workforce, people that are mentally, physically thriving and doing well, right? We want a, world that is actually not falling apart because it's been neglected or abused. So I think, most of us can get aligned around that. I do like 10 clicks, though, man. Just give me more clicks to get to something. That's fun. But
maybe that's on purpose.
Yeah. But Anthony, I really appreciate, and you've referenced this a few times, of doing the research. So this is actually a data-driven, let's not just have opinions and who can come up with the best expressions and phraseology, but like, what's actually true? What does the data say? And let's get aligned around data. And if more people were doing that and relying less just on opinions or headlines, I think we'd be in a lot better shape. But, the work that you've done and the way that you've presented it in what I think is a very digestible format. This isn't, overly academic or something like that, but something that even a schlep like me can figure out. It's great because, I think if you really think about it, like, be selfish. It's in your own best interest to do this. And we were talking earlier before we started taping, that the folks that I had the pleasure of working with, are generally in this generation, and I continue to be blown away by they want to do great work. They want to work at a place that's making a difference in people's lives, including their own, and when you can provide them with the format to do that and a palette to paint on, it's really cool. By the way, keeps me younger and I'm more tuned into what's going on in the world and keeps my brain a little softer. So I think it's only good stuff. And the more we understand everybody, the better we all are. It's sort of the richness of the fabric.
Absolutely. Or you can not buy the book. You can ignore the podcast and do what you've always been doing, and let's see how that works out. Knowing that,
spoken like a true New Yorker. Hey, hope that works out for you.
Status quo has not been good for any company. You think of Kodak and all these other companies. It hasn't been good. So, and it's hard. The pendulum has swung a little bit back towards companies with particularly in tech, although I will still say record unemployment, lowering demographics,
low unemployment. Yeah.
It's just it is still, and the more of your company being intangible assets, as in people, IP, software. But by the way, that IP and software created by people, at least for now. ChatGPT, third time I said it. But at least for now, it's very much intangible assets, and there's always going to be people involved in these things. You want to understand them, and you don't want to generalize them with the book or without the book. You want to truly, like my advice is read the book. It'll give you a good idea, but talk to folks. There's also going to be different wants and needs based on the individual, whatever their generation is.
No, exactly. Well, I can't highly recommend enough that people buy the book, read the book, get a little bit more information in your head to understand and engage. I think that's really the best thing that you can offer people. And from there, everybody makes their own decisions. But Anthony, I'm so pleased that we got introduced and I've been exposed to the work that you've been doing. I know that people that will take the time to read the book, listen to this podcast and other places where you're presenting what you have found can only benefit from it. And I know that I have, so thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your time today. It's been fun.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And again, we would encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And this is also going to be available on all your favorite podcast platforms. So we would love for you to subscribe there. So again, Anthony, thanks so much. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Bob. You too.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.